walls of the temple. And it is sort of around, it's around the other side, by the way. So the Wailing Wall is part of, you see these lower walls where it says Southern Wall and double and triple gates. And you see even farther down on the bottom right, you can see that the walls really can go far down and be part of the supporting of the foundation. So what is today's the Wailing Wall is the supportive foundation of the temple and some of the walls leading up to the Temple Mount. The temple itself is up there at the tippity top, and right now, right, you see like a colonnade that was there. Right now, that's been replaced by a mosque. And so the Temple Mount itself is two large mosques from Islam, and the Temple Mount, meaning the tippy top, the courtyard at the top, the flat top roof of, I mean, it's not a roof, the flat top of the structure is controlled by a consortium mainly led by Jordan. And so that Arabs and Muslims control the Temple Mount itself, and Jews control the lower part. So we pray at the wall of the foundation, and it's important kind of to understand. Um, the times have been different in the past. So I was fortunate that when I used to live in Israel in the 80s, and I think it was, I don't know if it's still true in the early 90s. I used to be able to, in the 80s when I was there, I used to regularly, I loved going to the temple, to the Kotel, to the Wailing Wall. And back then you could go on top. So the Muslim authorities will allow us on top, and I could go to the mosques and visit. A lot of that because of the tensions and security issues have gone down. So now it's pretty much limited to Muslims on top and Jews on the bottom. There's a lot of misinformation about that, which is a testament to the amount of misinformation there is about what goes on in Israel today by people who don't know and who don't go. In the sermon, I was talking about these gates at the bottom, in the middle. So you can see the doors. And what I just pointed out was these are the pilgrim gates. And when you'd go as a pilgrim, you'd go there, and there were internal staircases that went up to Solomon's colonnade. And uh, so it was very much like going up staircases. I mean, I guess that's what they were. So you would go to there would be a staircase to the right and a staircase to the left. So going to the right was going up, and the left side was going down. So like in American traffic, you would go to the right in general. So if you keep to the right for going up and keep to the right going down, there's a natural flow. However, there were four categories of people who would actually go up the wrong way. So they're supposed to go up to the left and go down to the left. So they're going against the traffic. And among those were people who were taking care of an elderly relative, and a person who is in the first year of mourning, of grief, and someone who's been uh, thrown out, shunned by their family or community, someone who's been thrown out by their family, and someone who has lost something really, really important to them. And then they would be greeted, and the Mishnah declares, like, the greeting would be first a question, which is, why are you, you know, why are you going up the wrong way? Like, what's been going on with you this past year? And then the answers, depending on what they said, the Mishnah gives a description of what you should say. So if someone says that, well, I'm in the year of mourning for a relative, then you could say back to them, may the one who lives in this house comfort you. And so I'm going to undo this for a second. And one of the questions that Heather just had is that where the standard expression for someone in grief today comes from. So if someone is in the year of mourning today, particularly if someone's in the first week of mourning or first month of mourning, then you say, may God comfort you along with all the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. And Heather pointed out that, uh, can these formulas be a little impersonal? Like, is that really, I mean, Heather, you can correct me, but part of what I hear and what you're saying is something I feel, which is sometimes formulas can feel really mechanical and automatic. Is that really comforting? If one of you, God forbid, says to me, actually, I'm in mourning right now. And I was like, oh, yeah, yeah. It's kind of like, what do we say? There are things Americans say, like, and it just feels automatic and empty. Or is it really deep? Now, the Mishnah doesn't say you can't say more. So I want to point out that the idea is that you could be saying more and having a conversation. And eventually, maybe it's your way of ending it, especially if you're standing and blocking the stairway. So maybe the way you end it is to say, well, may God comfort you along with all the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem, which is the way we do it today. So actually, if you're at a Shiva, I mean, obviously most Jews don't do it because most Jews are not, um, what's the right word, acting in a very traditional way, and so they're being themselves. So they don't but I'm going to say it, and a couple of other people might say it, and I sometimes change it. So instead of saying "May you be comforted along with all the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem," I say, um, "May you find comfort along with all of those who are grieving at this time," which I think is the main idea of it. And I think that's, for me, I have found that a beautiful balance between, you don't want to discount someone's pain by saying, yeah, 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 something, you're not the only one, right? That's kind of mean and awful. But you also don't, hopefully, there is something, it's also a recognition that is gentle, that you're not alone, and part of you not being alone is you're not alone going through this. I mean, we lost a close relative to COVID, and here in Ann Arbor, one of my wife's relatives that we'd reconnected with since moving here. It was a real shock, and she was not that old, and we still haven't had the memorial service, and it happened months and months and months ago. But I think it's comforting to know that we're not the only ones who have lost somebody. Like, and like, but I don't want to necessarily hear the other person's story, right? You know what I mean? I don't want to be here like, oh, you lost someone, let me tell you about mine. That's not necessarily where you want to go with it, but it's still like, may you find comfort along with people who are going through this, because you're not alone. And I think that that's beautiful. So I took Heather as asking about this balance we have between formula and sincerity. And in general, as you all know, and we've talked about a little before, I I think the most helpful way of understanding religion in the 21st century is to think of it as not a form of anthropology or something like that, not a branch of history, not a branch of archaeology, and not even really a branch of theology. I think it's really a branch of psychology. I think it's about, like, how do you live in a mentally well place? How do you shift, like with the therapist, how do you shift your perspective to seeing things how you didn't see them before, in such a way that you grow? And and I think with the rabbis talking about the idea that coming out of the Garden of Eden, yes, it there's so much loss involved in the patterns of evolution we've experienced, but um, there's so much possible gain with human growth. It's like going from childhood to adulthood. And you can either mourn the loss of innocence, like William Blake's songs of childhood and innocence and experience, and be like, oh, too bad we can't reclaim what it's like to be a little child experiencing wonder of the world and being naturally good. But Judaism doesn't glorify that. I mean, it's talking about, or if anything, a kind of recovered innocence. It's talking about a growth into a way of understanding the world. And often, if you pursue it, and I'm looking at all of you, it means attempting to be the biggest person in the world, in the room. I just think that's the best summary of what religion's trying to get you to. And if you don't want to be the biggest person in the room, and I recently had an incident where my job performance was criticized for perhaps good reason. I was in a situation where I just didn't want to be the biggest person in the room. Like, someone was attacking me for something. It was incredibly unjust. And I was like, no, 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 no. And then someone turned to me and said, "You're the rabbi. You can't say that." And I was like, you're right. Like, I mean, and so in a way, you're all being a rabbi, right? It's not about like the title. It's about, you have to exemplify that if you take this stuff seriously, it's supposed to help you grow to be more patient and more perspective. I mean, you're trying to get, so in that sense, it's a very psychologically sophisticated religion if you let it be. But it won't be if you don't let it be. But it's pointing you in. I mean, even we talk about how wonderful it is to argue, but there's a psychological dimension to that. I mean, it's incredible. It teaches you humility. It teaches you to listen. It teaches you to, um, not to build worlds in your head that you live in, but that those worlds need to be shared. So it's humanizing in all kinds of different ways. So I that was really, so I had, and I was also talking about in the sermon was mainly about when we get back in person in the temple, it's serving the exact same function it really is as the temple used to serve, which is the temple was not a place of celebration or partying that would happen around the temple. You festivals were party times, but you didn't party like, well, there were times when you partied in the temple, but ordinarily you just brought your offering. But there were times, it's very much today as we go back in person, there are going to be people coming from periods of real mental struggle, um, periods of loss and grief, periods of isolation. And then there'll be other people who are like, yeah, like, thank God we're back, please spare me the mask, the kind of like, let's get back to parading the Torah. And so people are going to be coming from different places, just like they came to the temple. Places of like, life is good, I had a good harvest, family's doing great, had a great year, it was inconvenient a lot of ways, but I've been working out lately and feeling good. And there are other people who are like, we just lived through like a historic pandemic. And how do you integrate those people? And I think we have a model there in the temple, which is those are great classifications of people. People have been isolated, and people have been experiencing grief. People have been caring for someone who is immunocompromised or elderly or otherwise need, or a child with special needs. Those people have had years very different from the rest of us, and or unless you're one of them. So and you may well be. And so how do we recognize all of that and get everyone back into a way of being able to be with each other in a psychologically aware way? So that, I know that was kind of a long thing. I'm long-winded sometimes. It's my Achilles heel, so I apologize for that. Um, and so, but I love looking at the pictures of the temple and thinking about like what it was like to go to the temple and what the role was. And the main idea, and if you were ever at a Beit Din and I asked you, is I really think the main idea of the temple is that the temple is all about forced sharing, and forced sharing, including information. So the temple functioned in a lot of ways. One of the ways when you're going up the wrong staircase or you're going down the correct staircase and someone else is coming up is you just found out who's sick. You just found out who got old. You just found out who died. You just found out who um, did something that their family has kicked them out about. Like, it was a massive way of sharing news, and in a way you weren't given the option not to. Like, in a way it was saying like part of your life needs to be public, or else you may just live in a place of shame. I mean, I really think about that one. I mean, it's too strong to even think about. It's hard, but the person who's been shunned. I mean, the rabbis debate that one because on the one hand, it's like, well, why are they being shunned? Like maybe, and so one of the rabbis says you should say to them, well, you know what? May you reconsider your actions so your family will take you back in. And the other rabbi says, may your family reconsider their actions and learn to be more compassionate and take you back in. And the majority opinion goes with the latter because we are a psychologically sophisticated and compassionate religion. But it's not like the other position wasn't voiced. But it's, like on some level, it forces people to share information. And that was a big function of the temple. It is an anthill. It's an anthill of people coming from all over and exchanging information, exchanging possessions, exchanging money. And what I mean by that is, you're delivering your offerings, which will go to the first responders and the essential workers of the temple, as well as to the poor. And so it's a place of establishing holiness through required sharing and formalized sharing. And because people don't naturally do that. If I have a great year, then I think about buying a Tesla. I don't think about going to the temple and sharing and sharing 20% or 30% of that year with essential workers to get that money. And so and you don't, and the temple can't just be a place of people who are like, oh my God, I'm showing up because now I'm in grief, or now I've lost all my money and I need help. A temple can't just be a group of people who are going through the part of their life where they need things. um, so it also has to be a place where people are giving, so that um, so that you go in and out of, you know, s- you have, sometimes you're in one line, sometimes you're in the other line. And but if it's only one line, it's a problem either way. So anyway, that's probably too much information. TMI. So I wanted to open it up. Last time we did a really intense lecture on Kabbalah, and I wanted to open it up to see if anyone, number one, well, if you remember any of it, you can respond to any of it you want. If you want to say something about how it helps you think about God or relate to God, doesn't have to be a thinking thing, it could be a feeling thing. Uh, or you could say, I don't, sorry, bang my ring. You could say, I don't want to, I don't necessarily want to comment on Kabbalah, but I do want to comment on my relationship with God. So I'm going to do a little teeny bit of review. Some of the things we talked about is for prayer, for a lot of mystics, prayer becomes a way of changing your mental state. And so that using, like, why do we do some of the same prayers over and over again? It's because, it's mantric. It tricks your mind into going in one direction in order to free another part of your mind. I had a wonderful conversation this morning with my oldest daughter, who has been teaching herself to type on with typing programs. So, and I was just telling her, like, the more you do it, the more it'll be automatic, like, to the point where if you guys talk, I mean, my fingers can just type it and I don't think about it. And so you keep at it. It'll take months and months because she's getting really, really frustrated. That's a Kabbalistic view of prayer, which is, no, you're not supposed to be there. And like, as I've said before, full of blessing are you, the rule maker of the universe, who is sanctified, you know, us, with each mitzvah. Like, every word could be a dissertation or 20. So like, instead of doing that, they're like, no, 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 it becomes mantric. So your brain is like typing away and then you're free. Like, and so for people that, I was going to say for people like me, I mean, it functions that way a lot for me. I mean, obviously I do the prayer so many times that, I mean, they're happening. And then another part of me is free. So one view is prayer is like, it could be mantric. They also do something I can't do. They did a lot of visual prayer so that you actually would see the letters and then you would start manipulating the letters in a classic, it's cross-culturally true visual meditation where they would, you would start moving the letters, moving them in circles, bringing you had like three-dimensional Rubik's Cube type games with letters in your head, which is another form that works for a lot of people, which is visual meditation, again, to somehow unlock a different brain state in relationship to God. And so they had certainly had meditation. A lot of it was forms of meditation. They would do visualization meditation. So like one part of Kabbalah is like prayer often becomes forms of freeing your mind in another way. It certainly was the sanctification. Another thing about it was the sanctification of the mundane, which is rather than say what is religious is when I get to synagogue, it's everything is equally godlike. And so every action, and if you're a little, maybe is OCD the wrong way to put it? I'd say just, I don't know, if you're prone to being nervous that you've done something, like you've left the oven on or something like that, or you forgot to shut the garage door and I have to get up at 3 in the morning to make sure I shut it. And of course, it's always shut, except for that one time out of like 50, which confirms the fact that I should be getting out of bed every night to check. So, like, if you're prone to that, don't do it because Kabbalah is really like every single thing you do is creating a pebble, like ripple effect that will rip through the universe, very much like fractal theory. Like each ripple is significant. So the fact is, if Max had a question right now, but I was too busy enjoying the sound of my own voice and I missed it, that the ripple effect of that could be cataclysmic. And so if you're worried about like, oh my gosh, I left the garage door open, like you maybe Kabbalah's not for you because you'll be like, every single thing I do could like destroy the universe. But they kind of go with that a little bit. So everything's significant, everything you eat, everything you do. On the other hand, if you're like me and my family last night, we had this big, was very powerful. I mean, my girls came home from a walk with their mom, and I was watching a YouTube video about how pretty much everything we recycle isn't recycled anymore. And they showed pictures of it. And my daughter is, and they know it's a big thing with me. And so Ziva said to me, Daddy, I understand what's happening, but I really wish you wouldn't show us these videos anymore. And I said, why? And she's like, it makes me crazy and afraid. Like, I just feel like there's no hope for the future. She's 8 years old. I was like, I'm really glad you told me that because like, you're right. So But then again, what I could teach her is in Kabbalah, because what she said to me, this is her. I mean, she said, I said, well, we can do better. We can stop it with the blah, blah, blah. She's like, Daddy, that won't make much difference. Right? She's right. Right? How much difference going to make it that we don't get takeout? Like it's not going to make a big difference in the scheme of things. But in Kabbalah, it can. In Kabbalah, every single action is holy, has the possibility of healing the universe or leading to greater anarchy or imbalance. And so that, you could say to someone like that, it actually, like every single thing we do, everyone does, you don't see it, but it could lead in ripple effects to a changing of the energies that make up the pond that we're all living in. So those are some of the things. Meditation, God is everywhere, every action is important, everything you say is important, and that evil in the universe is not an absence of God. It's not like, well, where's God when that happened? That evil is it's more of a scientific kind of way of seeing it, which is that it's it's imbalance that happens. Things get out of balance. It's life out of balance. And so evil is when it can be it's not an absence of God, it's that God is the system. An imbalance with the system can throw things really off. And it's not as easy as saying like evil is one kind of sin. It's sin. It's like what Paul says in Romans. Like evil is this and you got to get rid of that. It's like, well, that life's not that simple. And I even today, I mean, I try to view it, I try to understand where white resentment against anti-racism is coming from, and the more I sink into that, the more I understand that it's not so easy. That it's really easy to say, oh, white supremacists or neo-Nazis are terrible, but it's not so easy to say a friend of yours is. And so when you understand where people are coming, you realize it's not as evil to be like, ooh, you've got evil in you, we got to scrub it out. It's more like, how how are people systems, and how are we living in a system and sharing a system, and things can easily get out of whack. So anyway, those are some of the things. So I'll turn it over to you. Is there anyone who would want to share a little bit about whether that helps them relate to God, or they relate to God in a different way, or just talk about in a way the way you kind of feel out your relationship with God, whether that helps articulate it or not? Nicholas. Oh, I saw you on mute.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah.
It's definitely a lot to take in. I can tell how Kabbalists can spend an entire lifetime really studying this, and the diagram was a lot. I still have to study it more, but at a high level view, I've always struggled with faith and with my idea of God because I don't know. I don't think I'm some enlightened analytical thinker, but I think we're in such a time where science can prove a lot of things, and we are proving more things each and every day. And as a kid growing up, I was taken to church every Sunday and pretty much told with no reasoning to believe in this, believe in God, believe in miracles, believe in all of these things you've been taught up to this age to dispute because you can't really believe in it. So it's always been hard. And I think that lecture was awesome. It was very wholesome. It opened my eyes to a different idea of how to even think about God. I think there's so many different ways you can think about him or her or being, or it's just hard. There's so many different ways you can do it, and that really opened my eyes to how to take it in, how to learn from it, and build a relationship that may be different than something we learned growing up. I think Max, you brought that up. I think we have a pretty similar viewpoint on that, and Ava, you also brought up. I don't know. There was a lot brought up, and like I said, there's so much to go in, but it really did open my eyes. I'm excited to learn a little bit more about it, and there is a lot to learn. That was a very heavy diagram. I did some Google searching after, and like I said, a lifetime could be devoted to it. But that's why we're here. It may take a lifetime to really come to grips and to grasp how we believe in God, whatever it may be.
Thank you. That's well said. Anybody else? Ari, go ahead.
Yeah, so I, kind of had a similar thought. I was also raised in somewhat of a Christian home. And just this idea that, like, yes, God is exactly this, and we have to talk about God in exactly this way. And instead of this idea that everyone's relationship with God can be individual, but also that you don't all have to view God in the same way. Whereas I was very much taught like, yes, this is the thing. These are the things that God does. This is what makes God God. This is what makes Jesus God also. This is what, and it was like a whole like list, of doctrines and beliefs, and even like visually portrayed in very certain ways, very specific ways. And one of the reasons that one of the many reasons that I started looking into Judaism was to find a place where it was more acceptable to have questions and to come to conclusions on your own, and that if you thought about something in a different way, it wasn't inherently sort of wrong or bad. And as a queer person, as a woman, I haven't always seen myself reflected in religious spaces or in Christian concepts of God and deity. And so being able to have the freedom to say, well, this is how I relate to God. This is who I think God is, or maybe I just think God is energy, or takes this form or that form. It's very freeing because it allows me in a way um, to really accept the whole like um, the whole idea of like made in the image of God. That was like a big thing in the church that I grew up in. Was like, yeah, we're all made in the image of God, whatever. And it's like, well, when the only image of God you're giving me is like some old white guy, like I'm not in that image. Like that's not, I don't relate to that. So having the freedom to kind of explore what it means as an individual is really great. And I haven't done a lot of study of the specifics and the diagram and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, just that being able to really make it a personal connection with whatever you feel is divine, whoever or however you feel that. um I think that's a more um, useful and more powerful way to look at it.
I totally agree. It was beautiful. Let's go to Manisha and then Robin.
Okay, so I have not been able to verbalize this yet, so I'm just going to make an attempt because after doing the lecture in Kabbalah, I then went back and did all of the lectures on being kosher because I wanted to figure out how to incorporate different things into my life as quickly as possible because I'm just really dedicated to this. So I reflected last week on, so I used to work in hospice, and I have been one of the very few people that repeatedly was in a room when someone passed. It's not something that happens very commonly with people that work in hospice, but it's happened to me several times. And I have always been very resistant to this idea of God. And being in that space several times, I started to kind of question, like, something happened in there, you know what I mean, when someone passes. Like, it's so powerful. It's like this energy that I just like couldn't explain. And even I was in the room with my grandfather passing, and very similarly, like something that is just, you can't even put it into words. And then thinking about, I found myself very frustrated listening to the lectures about being kosher. I was raised as a vegetarian. I was vegetarian for 15 years. I'm almost 30. So I've been eating meat for the past 15. And I just really was reflecting last week on like interconnectedness, I guess, between humans, plants, food. I mean, it kind of was, it was so powerful, and I'm still trying to make full sense of it. But I think what's been resonating with me is that God being this energy that's in all things and being conscientious. I think that's something I really appreciate, is that it's really about, I don't know. I don't know. I don't quite understand the word yet, but I don't know. I keep thinking like it's so like humanistic. I don't know. But it really it resonates with me. And I really, I guess, was kind of holding on to this idea of everything being connected and God being within everything, which I think I just wanted to verbalize.
Thank you. Well, and we're going to get back to that. I mean, I hope. Robin.
So I'm an atheist. I am not an atheist in the science means it's not true way. I don't care how people explain the things that aren't a matter of provable truth. I just personally don't feel it. And that's fine. One of the things I've been aware of for a very long time is that it's totally fine to be an atheist Jew. It's just not terribly polite to talk about it. So that's something that I've been very interested in learning about, whether or not I wish to place myself in the category. It's just very interesting to me that a religion that talks so much about the personified person of God has room for that. And I've been kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop on how that fits together. And last week was when that happened. So that was pretty great. Thank you.
Wow. If you can articulate how that happened, write it up. It'll be like the most important book ever written. No, but well, I mean, and I'm just going to gloss on that because you'll let me, is that, I mean, it is pretty remarkable that Judaism has never been, to my knowledge, I have a couple of friends who did academic work in this area, but I haven't read it all myself. It's never been anti-science. It's because if God is, and I'm not saying you have to believe this, right? But I mean, I do. When I going back to Manisha, like, so I say the Shema so many times, right? The Shema, God is one, God is one, God is one. And sometimes, like I view the liturgy somewhat poetically. There are times where I see something in it, like the prayer for me means something that I was unexpected, and those are beautiful moments. But normally, it's like, when I say Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, I'm not having epiphanies. It's normally like, okay, what do I mean by that? Like I have a go-to. And my go-to for the Shema is definitely that we live in one interconnected system. And that for people who view that kind of scientifically, that's okay with me. Like going back to what Robin was mentioning. But like my wife and I talk about this all of the time. Do not take for granted, we should never take for granted that somehow that's where most human beings are at, or human societies. We do not think in terms of systems, and which is weird, because if you look at academic work for the past 100 years, almost all of it is in the category of systems theory. I mean, the psychology I learned growing up of Freud and self-esteem theory and talk therapy, all of that's out the window. Like anyone who, like me, who grew up learning all that stuff and thinking I was going to be like a therapist, even the therapy I went through was like today considered archaic, because now we understand ourselves as part of systems. I'm not going to understand Robin unless I understand the systems that she's in. Like, so because it's a process. She's
They.
Oh, sorry, they. Thank you. No, Robin, thank you for saying that. So I mean, thank you for correcting me, and keep doing it. So that I can't understand Robin without understanding the processes and systems in which they are living, right? And so that because then it's like, okay, this kid is rebellious, but like why are they being rebellious? I can't understand that without understanding all of the systems in which they're embedded. And even systemic racism has the word system in it, and a lot of people rebel against it because they're like, what do you mean a system? What, there is no system. Of course, everything, economics is understanding systems. So that in a way, God is the fact that really the whole capital S system that interconnects all of us is the consciousness that we're aspiring to. And so that it would make no sense if we were anti-science, because the more I understand the way systems work, the better. The one thing that would be, not one thing, but a thing that is religious about it is only this. The situations in which we live and act in every moment of our lives are overdetermined or underdetermined in terms of which way we want to go with our action. And so the part that often people miss when they're not understanding how systems really work, and is that there's no algorithm that'll tell you how to behave. And that's what we were getting at last time. So when you really start to understand how the systems are involved, like even whether it's economics or psychology, it's very hard to be like, well, Meredith, this is the way it works. So if this is your problem, I mean, even the way my doctor works, right? You go in, you say something, they're like, oh, you triggered me. Now I know it's this, right? That's actually not the way life works. Like, because in any one situation, there are too many principles operating to know exactly what the right behavior is. And so one of the things that Kabbalah was talking about that I stressed is, how do we learn to have the right kind of eye, you know, this one, like, and I guess the ego too, good pun. How do we learn to know or be in the flow of how to act? So, if I was going to pick out a couple. Is Nicholas still here? You had to go. Yeah. So there. So if you guys are together, right? Like, there's nothing that's going to tell you, well, Nick is hungry, so I order food or something. Like it, we have to. How do you learn to kind of like open up and feel the flow of the system to know whether what the right thing to say is, when to listen and when to talk, right? When to act and when to refrain, when to hear things one way and when to hear things another. And so we were talking about like when you do boundaries and when you take boundaries down. Like, Kabbalah is very aware that, like, look, we believe, the Kabbalists are very much like, we're with the scientists, which is, we also are trying to understand how the world works. If you spoil a child, they end up ruined as an adult. That's a scientific observation. And the Kabbalists are very into that observation. But that also doesn't tell you, today, when I'm with my grandchild, do I buy them ice cream when they ask for it or do I not? Do I take them to Target or do I not? So if you end up with one of these people, and we're probably all of them, all of us are probably they, which is, I mean, I just look at the world, it's just full of these messages, oh, today this editorial or this thing on Facebook or this wellness thing says we should all be we, we should all be better listeners, right? And we're all like, okay, who needs religion? I need to be a better listener, but then the thing is, there are times not to listen. I'm just telling you, like, there are times where you need to talk and not to listen. So, like, all those people who are like, it's all about listening, or those people who are like, it's all about love. Like, it's about love, 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 love. I'm telling you, I agree with Ecclesiastes when there is time to hate. Like, and that's the healthiest thing to do, and it's the right thing for balancing the system. It doesn't sound very Christian, but which is strange because there's plenty of hatred in the history of Christianity, like everywhere. But so like, it's like, there really is. How do you know how to be in a moment? And I don't know if religion's anything if not trying to understand that, and what we're each after. So it's both scientific, which is, I want to understand how things work, and I don't have to shut out any information. But I also don't accept the fact that, given enough information, I now know what to do. Like, there is no algorithm, because the truth is that reality is overdetermined. There are too many messages. Like right now, I need to call my mom. I need to be a better listener to you. I need to, let my cat out. I need to take care of myself and maybe actually eat a vegetable. Like, there's so many things I have to do right now. And so it's not just like, well, it's really simple, Nadav, make a schedule. You know what? I've made schedules, and then, a schedule needs to go out. There's a time to go by the schedule, and there's a time where the schedule must be thrown out the window. Like, I mean, like, so that's the only problem I'd say the Kabbalah is trying to solve, is trying to say, this doesn't get you being smart and analytical and understanding the rules and being really good observer, doesn't get you out of being in the present moment. And your connection to God is nothing if not being connected to the present moment. And for those of us, and I think I probably speak for all of us, for those of us who have had those moments of being in the present moment, we feel close to God. Like, we feel so grateful for, like, how did that happen? And then understanding people as processes and ourselves as processes rather than things is just really, it's like, you know, um, I mean, uh, you know, we're looking at you guys in the Nicholas Gabriel. Is Gabriel the right pronunciation of your last name?
Yes.
I just
Perfect.
because that's in the Gabriel Pinsky couple, and like you are two energies that flow together, now making a system of your own, and figuring out how that works in a way. And when two people like you are when you're able to feel like exactly what your partner is in the present moment, like who they are now, how they're becoming in the world, and they feel that about you, it's like really, really powerful. I mean, it's really God and love, merged together. And so it's, so that whatever religion is, it should be that. And therefore, it's not like, well, when I go to church, I'll remember all the important things I'm supposed to think about, or synagogue. So I appreciate all those reflections on on what Kabbalah brings. I'll tell you what, is it okay if I share another quote? It'll push us along with so like one things we were looking at, and I'll just remind you, so this is the chart, and like you said, you know what? It also looks like Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole. So, and I think that's on purpose. In other words, don't get lost in this thing. A lot of people have, and you'll never make it back. I mean, God forbid. So, but one of the big things is we concentrated on Gevurah and Chesed, love and boundaries. It can also be hate. I mean, love and accountability. Is that I was thinking about this. I almost gave a sermon about it yesterday about masks. I mean, one of the things as we go out in public is that chesed is when you do not assert yourself and you have this kind of allowing people to be who they are without judgment. Um, and it is sort of not having great, well, I mean, it's not having big boundaries, because gavura is another word for boundary, really. I mean, what gavura is it's very much connected in Kabbalah with the having, boundaries. And I think that that speaks to, so the mask thing is kind of interesting, because it's like, well, my friends aren't wearing masks. Do I wear a mask? Is that okay? Do I assert myself? Do I not assert myself? And a lot of us are having those questions today, but that's Kabbalah right there. Kabbalah is, in this moment, do I not make a big deal of something, or do I make a big deal of something? I was just reading somewhere that it's almost like we're breaking into tribes. There's the mask wearing tribe, they're over on the left. And there's the not mask wearing tribe. You're all a bunch of idiots for putting on the damn mask if you already got the vaccine. And they're on the right side. Like, get rid of the boundaries. Like, why are you being so judgmental and distant? But as we all know, like, my God, I want to raise my girls to know when to have boundaries. And I want to raise my girls to know when they can let their guard down and be in a place of trust. And so it's never going to be one or the other. And people who oversimplify are also oversimplifying life, which doesn't really help any of us. Um, and so, some of these quotes are the most famous ones from Kabbalah. And so, one of the ideas is that if the level we're all trying to get to at some point, well, maybe you're not, I mean, or maybe I'm not, is the level of being a tzaddik or a tzodeket, someone, someone who is, what would it mean to, let's just put it this way. The tzaddik is one who knows what to do and say in every situation. And there may be none on the earth, or there may be 12 of them on the earth, but let's assume that a few people are, it's the closest we get to a saint. But so if there's one who is like this, when he sees, and maybe I can say, when they see a human being engaged in Torah and mitzvot, seeking to refine themselves, to conduct themselves with purity, then the tzaddik expands, filling themselves with all kinds of flowing energies from above to pour into Shekhinah. So they're channeling the divine energy, they're channeling balance in order to reward those purifying themselves, those cleaving to Torah and mitzvot. Thus, the entire world is blessed by the tzaddikim, and the Shekhinah is likely blessed through them. But if, God forbid, humans defile themselves by distancing themselves from Torah and mitzvot, by perpetrating evil, injustice, and violence, then the tzaddik stands to gaze at what they have done. When they see, they gather and contract themselves, ascending higher and higher. Then the flow of all the channels ceases, and Shekhinah, God's presence, is left dry and empty, lacking all good. One who understands the secret understands the immense power a human has to build and to destroy. So come and see the power of tzedakah, they can unite all of the Sphirot, harmonizing the upper and lower worlds. So again, if there's basically one, this is just the way they think about it. If everything is suffused with God, think of it as there's a God dimension and the visible dimension. And it's connected all the way through. The upper and lower worlds are connected. But if you actually have someone who really knows how to be in the right moment, they can be a massive conduit for tikkun olam, for the rectifying of the illnesses of our system. And when they're around other people who are channeling good energy, they can help. They're like the great teacher or the great beautiful person or the great grandmother, like they can have a way of opening up the channels even wider. But when there's hatred and injustice, they also contract them because they don't know what to do. I mean, like there, there's not much. I guess what I see in this is there's not much we can, like, I don't know, maybe I'm just tell me if I'm self-justifying myself. I don't know what to do in the face of racism and anti-Semitism and anti-environmentalism. I mean, like, people are just doing it. Like, I can't believe the way they're acting. It it it's not like the saint or whatever that Sadiq has a way of magically waving a wand and getting those people to stop. There's a limitation on how much you can change the world. And when people are really imbalanced, it's kind of demonic. Like, like what what are you supposed to do? I mean, even if you could totally be in the moment and you were the one who really knew how to, like, I know how to be with people and I know how to read them. But if that's what you're reading, like, that in a way, what they're saying here is that the person who's really connected to God, but often will just sort of contract. Like, there's not there's there they can't wave a Harry Potter wand and make it all go away. I'm not and so I always found that, like, kind of a profound. Yes. So Ava, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this document up on the Intro to Judaism webpage so you can get to it. It's a curriculum I wrote earlier in my life, and so I'm going to put it up there. It's a, like, course I teach on Kabbalah. We talked about the idea that if God is infinity, then everything that is finite rests on infinity in logic. And so Cordovero says everything exists through the divine energy that flows to things large and small and clothes itself in them. If God's gaze were withdrawn for even a moment, all existence would be nullified. And that's the meaning of the verse, that God enlivens everything. Divinity flows and adheres in each thing that exists. God's presence fills the entire world. Contemplating this, you are humbled and your thoughts purified. And Rav Kook, who was the first chief rabbi in Israel, in British Mandate Palestine before 1948, used to say, like, what we're trying to do is constantly bring out the holy sparks in everything, the divine, and get those reunify those fragmented worlds. We know the potent energy of the divine ideal at the root of all existence, but it hasn't been revealed and actualized in the world around us. But the entire momentum of existence approaches the ideals. The ideal ripens within our spirit as we ascend. As we become aware of the idea, absorbing it from the abundance beyond finite existence, we revive and restore the fragments that we gather from life. From every motion, every force, every dealing, every sensation. Again, it's like every moment, every substance, trivial or important. Scattered energy stammers in its entirety, mouthing solitary syllables that combine into a dynamic song of creation. Sprinkling, then flowing, this life energy is suffused with holy energy. We raise these scattered sparks and arrange them into worlds constructed within us in our private and social lives. In proportion to the sparks we raise, our lives are enriched. Everything accords with how we act. The higher the aspiration, the greater the action, the deeper the insight, the higher the aspiration. So, it's every moment counts. And I love that idea that Rav Kook adds of building worlds. Like every relationship we have, we're building a world. in the way we eat, we're building a world. In the way we organize ourselves politically, we're creating a world. And so like everything in a way is world making. Um, let's see. The last paragraph, the second paragraph of the next quote by Rav Kook, everything teems with richness. Everything aspires to ascend and be purified, if you can sense it. Everything sings, celebrates, serves, develops. I know it's a lot. It's very philosophical. It sings, it celebrates, it serves, it develops, it evolves, it uplifts, and it aspires to be arranged in oneness. So when you're saying the Shema, you're not just saying Rav Nadav's old, okay, we're all part of one interconnected system, but you're also saying the system has a desire. Like there is a what Spinoza used to call like conatus. The system is itself striving for homeostasis. It's striving for symbiosis. It's striving for healthy partnership and equilibrium. And so that one of the challenges of Kabbalah, as many people have said about it, which is fine, I mean, you can have all kinds of challenges, is that how do you have a personal God that is something like a word for the universe? And one of the answers to that is, who said the universe is a derelict? Like who said the universe can't have a desire or a will? I mean, when we say in the Kaddish, may, the way I translate, Yikadav Yikadash Shmei Rabbah, Bi'alma Divrei Teviam Lech Machte, how do you say, like, may we make the God's intentions for the universe come to be in our lifetime and in each one of our days? Well, if you translate the universe, how can the universe have purposes? You know, what can Heschel mean when Rabbi Heschel says, you know, and I've said it before in the class earlier in one of the lectures, that how can you say that we don't know what God is, but we know what God wants? And if you're going to be Kabbalist, how can you say in the universe what the universe wants? And so the Kabbalists will start talking. That's why that list from Rav Kook, that who says that you can't say that the universe wants something? And you know, I know that you could say that the universe, it doesn't care if someone goes out and tortures an animal. It just doesn't care. Like you're crazy for saying it cares. But the other answer is, why are we crazy for saying the universe cares? I think you're crazy for saying the universe doesn't care, because we can feel that this, like, systems move toward homeostasis, toward balance, toward mutuality, mutual purpose. So that's why in many of my lectures on theology, I focus on the concept of symbiosis, that the idea that I'm just a wishful thinker, that the universe, as Nietzsche said, I love Nietzsche, but this is one area where I always struggle with Nietzsche, like, don't say the universe is, that nature is some wonderful place of mutual cooperation. You know, I've seen the animals go out and tear apart other animals, you know, so don't say it's like, oh, just be like the animals and be like in the Garden of Eden. But the thing about, as you know, is that I would refer Nietzsche to the Lion King, you know, where Mustafa tells little whatever, I forget, Simba, I guess it is, you know, well, like, yes, we hunt and kill those things, but we don't kill more than we need. The only ones we kill are the ones that, like, we eat, and then we eat the whole thing and share it. So like humans, they like to kill more than they need and decimate populations, right? And Simba, if we eat too many of them, then there are none left to eat. Like, so like Mustafa's already getting it, which is the system itself is yearning for some kind of balance. And just because it's not a vegetarian balance in that case doesn't mean it's not about mutuality. I mean, all these studies, there was a study I gave a sermon on about 5-6 years ago. It was a real scientific study, because I check those out sometimes, see if I can get sermons out of them. And one of them was about, it was a study of in the Kalahari, where the animals come to the watering hole, and they were noticing that, like, do animals compete for the water at the watering hole? And I know you've all seen those Nova episodes, so don't pretend you haven't. You watch the National Geographic Channel like I do, and you're always like, what's going on there, you know? And one of the, because yes, sometimes the lions are grabbing a gazelle, and you know, you got to deal with that. But one of the things I noticed is that there really is a lot of turn taking at the water, and even like they notice that some animals eat the top of the vegetation that grows there, and some like to eat the middle parts of the vegetation, and some people like to eat the bottom parts of the vegetation. And the idea is that these things have evolved over tens of thousands of years. So that in a way, like the system has found a way to like, you know, you get the top part, I'll take the middle part, you take the lower part. So that, yes, it's okay to say that the universe has intentions. It's okay to try to feel what the universe is. There is something that Aristotle used to say when talking about ethics and talking about this issue, because Aristotle pointed out that the universe is unlike Plato. One of his big criticisms of Plato is that Plato said the important thing is to understand correct moral aphorisms, and then you'll just apply them. So like if you have the right rules of behaving well, then you just behave well, you follow the rules. And Aristotle's critique in the beginning of the Nicomachean Ethics is that, there are too many rules operating at any one time. So the problem is like, which one do you, how do you apply the aphorism, and which aspects of the situation do you take in? And so when Aristotle is saying, so how do you figure that out? Because you have so many choices. It compares it to the fact that there is something called health, and there is something, and health and human flourishing are really very, very similar concepts. Like the idea that how do I act in situations and to promote the health, the flourishing of the people involved. And so, trying to go for a more holistic concept than a rule and action algorithm. Uh, and so, yeah, the universe. So that's a big part of how you start to personalize God in those in the Kabbalistic system. Uh, so those are some of the things. But yeah, no, I didn't get a chance to go by. Anyway, so those are some of the things. Just continuing with Kabbalah. And Ailey, I just want to say hi. It's so nice to see you. And other parts of the recording. We recorded the early part. And if you ever want to check it out, but it's good to see you. And Ailey, I wanted to introduce you to Ava. Ava is new with us, and we'll make sure there are more opportunities to introduce you and to get to know each other. But it's been wonderful, and you guys have a lot in common, actually. So, Ailey, are you comfortable introducing yourself again? We all went around again, but you don't have to today if you don't want to. Do you feel like reintroducing yourself to Ava?
Yeah. Yeah. Hello, I'm Ailey, and I am a student at the University of Michigan, and I've been on this journey for like a year and a half now. So I'm always just eager to learn and everything. So it's very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Mhm.
Thank you. So I'm going to share one more Kabbalistic text, then we'll close out the Kabbalah. And that is one you may have been reading when I had it up here. But this is the famous description of the contraction of God and the origin of the universe. And so I'll put it up, and we may have gone over it before. My memory is not always perfect. When the infinite divine flowing energy, this is by the way, my source is, it's from the late 1500s, from Likutim Chadashim. He was one of Cordovero's, the leading Kabbalist disciples, and Isaac Luria was the most famous of Cordovero's disciples, but Chaim Vital was also extremely influential, and he wrote down the approach to Genesis that they understood to take place. How does infinity produce a universe? Well, you have to think of it like that infinite divine energy, which we don't get to see in its perfect form, unless there's a new Big Bang, and it wished to create. So again, we can attribute to a flow of energy a wish. It's okay to personify it. To create a material universe, it withdrew its presence. It did a contraction. At first, infinity filled everything, and now even an inanimate stone is energized by it. Otherwise, the stone could not exist at all. It would disintegrate, which is something I described last time. The energy of infinity clothes itself in garment upon garment. How true is that? At the beginning of creation, when infinity withdrew its presence all around in every direction, it left a vacuum in the middle, surrounded on all sides by the energy of, I'll just start using the Hebrew, Ein Sof, empty there in the middle. The energy withdrew like water in a pond displaced by a stone. When the stone is dropped in a pond, the water at that spot does not disappear, merges with the rest. So the withdrawn energy merged with the rest, and the middle remained a pocket of vacuum. Then I'm sorry. Then one frequency of the divine energy, like a drop in the ocean, was extracted, descending into the vacuum, so into this empty space, into the womb. It transformed into a mass of matter. That's actually the original concept of a golem. So the golem didn't start as a kind of Frankenstein, uh, late medieval, early modern Hasidic story. Its origin is in Kabbalah. Golem was the original mass of the beginning of matter, surrounded in every direction by the energy of Ein Sof. And out of this mass came energized matter. So then it's matter, the energy is going into the matter. How does matter contain energy? For in its simple desire to realize its intention, the divine energy re-energized the matter with a ray of energy, which had been with Rishon. Now, not all the energy, because obviously if all the energy had gone back into the mass, it all would have just become energy again, and the original state would have been restored, meaning just one big infinity of energy, which was not the intention. So how is it we can have a finite universe and finitude somehow embedded in infinity? That's the big theological question. To fashion pottery, the potter first takes an unformed mass of clay and then puts his hand inside the mass to shape it. Wow, I wonder where they came up with that. Maybe from Genesis 1 and 2, where it says in Genesis 2, God took the clay and fashioned it. So the divine flow put its hand in, so it's interpreting Genesis. So the divine flow put its hand into the shapeless mass of matter. That is, a ray of energy returned into it. As this energy began to enter the mass, vessels were formed, which were combinations of matter and divine energy. So here, as some of you know, when I was doing a class a couple of months ago, I was talking about the relationship of the Big Bang and Genesis, and people said to me, that's just a bunch of modern imposition. None of that is in Genesis. And I'm like, but you have to understand the main form of Jewish theology understood God making the human from clay would be like a description of we're all watching some PBS Nova episode on superstring theory or on the formation of the galaxies. And if you imagine you're watching one of those episodes and you're watching one of these recreations of how the galaxies formed, they're seeing that as like a hand shaping matter. And so it's not brand new idea. Like that's the way they see that's what they're describing. Um, and so the first vessel, Keter, which was could contain the energy, but almost immediately the other vessels exploded, and they broke. Their spiritual essence ascended back to the mother's womb, while the shattered vessels became our universe. So the womb we're still connected by the umbilical cords, but they're everywhere. It's the inflow of the divine energy. It is the infinite that makes possible the finite. It is the frame of the movie film in between each frame. Otherwise, there wouldn't be reality. So our universe requires the inflow of divine energy, even though the energy can never exist in its pure form. It's like when you sit in the shade, though the sun does not shine on you directly, it illuminates the shaded area. So in other words, it's like the movie film. You may not see the black parts in between each frame, but they're there. Otherwise, all would be just dark, just like this. The Ein Sof illuminates the world with creation indirectly. Without it, we wouldn't exist at all. And so I can better see the chat area. We're back. So there we go. So we're coming. So any that's our Kabbalah. We're done. I wanted to make sure you got to introduce some of the main texts. I'll post them on the website, and you get a sense. Now, you don't have to follow any of that, but that is the central Kabbalistic myth that generates the way they understand Torah and each moment of our lives. Any questions or it doesn't have to be a question. Any comments about it or thoughts that it generates in you that you're willing to share?
How do we find the website, Rabbi?
BethIsrael-aa.org and go to learn, and you will see it. So the website is simple. Yeah, it's our website.
All right, thank you.
No, and you'll see Intro to Judaism.
Okay.
Okie doke. So with Kabbalah behind us, did a little bit of temple today. And I'm just going to take a look at the intro page myself. So I know that the next couple of things for us are going to be holidays and let me talk a little bit about what's coming up. So there's today, then 2 weeks from today is May 16th. Initially, I thought instead of having class, I would just invite you to the Shavuot Tikkun, our learning sessions in the evening, because it's the holiday in which the holiday is mostly observed through studying and learning together. But I decided that we're going to have class that day anyway, because it's a way of getting in more classes. And so that if you go to the website, and I'm going to share it so you can see it, then you'll see that I did add in 1 p.m. class, and that's conversion students only, or conversion curious. And then 7:30 p.m. is our Shavuot Tikkun study sessions. Really, really, really want you to go so that we celebrate Shavuot. If it's at all possible, it's important. It's all by Zoom. Shavuot, the day of the celebration of receiving the Torah, and also one of the 3 main harvest festivals. It is observed today through staying up all night, if possible, and doing learning all night long. I wish you that at times in your life you do the whole stay up all night kind of thing. And I've done it many times, but I'm not doing it this coming Shavuot. So I'm at the stage of my life where sometimes I go to bed. So, but I recommend if you guys want to get together and keep studying, that's fine, but at least start with us. So start with us at 7:30 p.m. to 8 is praying. And then 8 o'clock to 11 is Shavuot. It's on our website. And it is also, you'll get emails about it. And if you're not on our email, you got to let us know. And so, so Minyan on May 16th, it's going to be 7:30 to 8, and it's going to be part of that link. So Minyan will be part of Shavuot. So it's 7:30 to 8 is Minyan, and then 8 o'clock is when the learning begins. And we're going to start it with Prosecutor Eli Savitt of Washtenaw County, and then there'll be other rabbis teaching besides me. So there'll be multiple rabbis teaching, and you can pick which Zoom sessions and topics you want to go to, and that's typically how Shavuot Tikkun works. It's usually that, like back in the days where I used to get together with my friends and do it, which is a totally legit way to do it, is we get together and we all pick something to teach. You don't have to be an expert in order to teach. You could just say, I've always wanted to study the Lord is my shepherd psalm. And then you show up and you're like, I knew I was going to go over it and prepare it, but I forgot. So let's just like read it together. And so you can read it together. So you can do it as friends and like stay up late and just like pick different texts to read and discuss, or you can go to a formal thing where you study with different teachers, and that's what we're doing at Beth Israel. So that's coming up on May 16th. Then I have June 6th will be our big review day. It'll be a final session. At least that's my idea now. My idea is that hopefully we'll be able to go to mikveh after that. So I'm assuming the mikveh will be open at that point. And then that study session may be extra long. And the only point of that day is to talk about the kinds of things that get asked at a Beit Din and to prepare for it. And I think it's a good thing that even for someone, let's say Ava just joined the group, I would still come to that because like it's really well focused, like you don't have to wait to learn about like what you need to know the day of conversion. Like the earlier you know that, the better. So that'll be that day. And then and then it depends. If the mikveh is still closed, I will add more study sessions. So I say potentially June 27th. I'm going to go on, God willing, I'm going to go on a 2-week vacation in June. So I haven't had a vacation that long in definitely since way before the pandemic. And so I'm hoping to drive and see my parents with my family. So that's why there'll be a break. I could always get another teacher to come in, but that's why we're kind of ending at that point, or thinking of ending, but it's to be determined. These were some of the topics we didn't get to, but actually we did get to a lot of them. I think Judaism, your relationship with God, is something we've been discussing. Religious practice in daily life, we actually talked about at one point, although I'll bring it back in a different way. And, we haven't done all of the holidays, but we did some of them already. The synagogue prayer and Jewish symbols is not long, and it was kind of weird to do when we're not in the synagogue. Usually I would say, let's meet at the synagogue and go around the synagogue and look at all the symbols and stuff and understand them. So I've been kind of procrastinating on that one. Jewish life cycle, we really kind of did already. Bible and Development in Judaism, I really think we did earlier. Holocaust in Israel, I usually leave to the end. And it depends on how long we want to spend on that. So, or whether it's, but the Holocaust in Israel is, I mean, they're both very personal in so many ways. Look, I've gotten a little bit cowardly in my recent years, which is I used to be able to teach Israel more, but I worry that I'm going to, uh, I'm worried that it's such a sensitive political issue at this point that I don't want to, I don't want to do more harm than good by like, I, I, I I have to figure out whether I can just sort of get the courage to tell you what I think about Israel without you thinking I'm trying to brainwash you or I guess yeah, unduly use my authority to influence you. That's my concern. I don't want you to think I'm trying to abuse my position by um, taking stands in a controversial area. On the other hand, I have my wife Lynn, whose attitude is that was exactly what I needed someone to do in my conversion course, and no one did it, which is to say, like, let me do for Israel what I did for Kabbalah. Let me put stuff on the screen. Let me show you a timeline of the history of Israel, and let me just trust myself and that I'm not going to try to unduly influence you, and then I'm certainly open to people if being open to people who think I am not giving the whole Megillah, the whole story on the Arab-Israel conflict. But so I've got to figure out what to, what to do. And go ahead, Ava.
Sorry if I could interject. I know that this is like a controversial topic, and like especially at universities right now. Like my school put in the Illini student government put in a doctrine in last October concerning the Arab-Israeli conflict, and like they decided to define anti-Semitism. The student government did with one Jewish senator out of I don't know how many senators we have, and then that only spurred on more issues, and then furthermore, like the Brandeis Foundation got involved and sent a report to the Department of Education. So like, I'm just kind of curious and would love to know like the differences, and this could be an eventual topic, or like the differences between like political Zionism versus like religious Zionism too, because I think that there are clear differences, and at Hillel we like to have conversations about like and have conversations and connections with Palestinian student groups about like what drives their thoughts, and like it's just really kind of interesting to me, and I just wanted to interject. I really don't know what the stance is and whether things are being politically or religiously driven. So sorry, thank you.
No, I mean, part of what you're saying is that it's just so, why not talk about the elephant in the room when it's actually happening? I mean, the elephant is stomping around in our lives. You know what I mean? We might as well examine it. So, what would you say if I said that the next session we're going to talk about Israel, and I'll try to be, um, I'll try to be human and but I do have. I mean, like this is something that I was very passionate about teaching. I have like you can see I have a Kabbalah curriculum. I have an Israeli Arab history curriculum, and it's pretty even-handed, in my opinion. And definitely, at the very least, we can talk about history, which is something that doesn't get. So why don't we say the next time we're going to do that? If what you could do, and you is in advance of that, if you, and some of you already have, if you could spend some time with the videos that I put on the syllabus, that would be great. Most of them are on YouTube, and some of them, if you just, these days, media is hard to track. Like if you just do a search in YouTube or a search on a Roku or a search, like they'll show up in different places. But there are three documentaries about the three stages. One is the 50 Years' War. And the next section is the elusive peace, which is the continuation of the negotiations over a Palestinian state and formation of Palestinian state and what that would look like, what are the issues are. And then the third one is actually, then of course that didn't resolve anything, mainly because Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated by Jewish extremists, and also because Yasser Arafat withdrew on the agreement that he had agreed to, and uh, and based in his own words on fear of assassination. And so then Ehud Barak negotiated Camp David with Clinton, but all these things basically went nowhere. So then you have the Oslo agreements, and there's a third documentary called The Road to Oslo, and that's sort of optional. I mean, it's kind of more of the same. I mean, you could say it's the most relevant thing because it's the most recent, but it's fascinating. It's really fascinating. One thing I will say is that that if you haven't watched them yet, they're very healing. Like what you find is what is in these sort of PBS documentaries is, and one of the Road to Oslo was HBO, is you find what you probably have already experienced in your own life, which is when enemies get together to talk about the history, even like, my family was affected by that bombing, or I hate you because my family was kicked out of Haifa and I'm still waiting to go back to my home. But when they actually sit in rooms negotiating for days and days and days, whether it's in Oslo or Camp David, um, usually there's a certain pattern that forms, which is, you know, they hate each other, then they start to show each other pictures of their kids, then they realize that they both like, I don't know, Marvel comics or something. And it can be very uplifting, even though we all know that there were no agreements that came out of it, and that's tragic. So the ending is bad. The ending is, and nothing ever came of this, and things got worse. The end, to be continued with more bad news. But the actual watching of it can be very healing because you see people who find ways to see humanity in each other, and even start to see each other's points of view about what went on. At the very least, they often agree about the history. And that's actually the weird thing is today, the kind of activities we have from BDS and from student governments, they take place in such a crazy vacuum that it's like they just have alternate sets of facts. And I have to tell you, the facts are only the facts. There are not alternate sets of facts. Like, I mean, you can't just, if the Soviet Union tricked an Arab leader into an action, that's either a fact or it's not a fact. And it's something when people negotiate, they talk about. For those of you who are interested, I'm also trying to get on the Ann Arbor City Council agenda for this week because they're having a meeting, and one of the council person for my ward in Ann Arbor has introduced a resolution that the Ann Arbor City Council should begin an examination and basically of human rights abuses associated with Israeli persecution of Palestinians for the sake of the vulnerable and sad and oppressed Palestinian population of Ann Arbor. So hopefully they'll let me tell them why I don't think that's a great idea, and why it's a little bit hypocritical, because I'm sure if they investigate, I'm sure they wouldn't want to investigate human rights abuses of China, because they would be concerned, rightly so, that people would be inflamed to take it out on Asian American and Chinese American and Chinese residents of Ann Arbor. But somehow, when it comes to Judaism, trying to inflame people's passions that Jews are colonialist, genocidal maniacs, and if Jews become targets of hate in Ann Arbor, which we are, then somehow that's a good thing. That's like social justice warrior stuff. So that there's a lot of exceptionalism that takes place with Judaism, where it's okay to get angry at us and hate us and not ask us what our opinion is about the Palestinian conflict, but just assume that we're by nature oppressors, and manipulating the geopolitical world. Like I have always said, I've never been invited to those meetings. The meetings I have been invited to are the ones where I pressure Israel to recognize Palestine and to, for God's sake, have no aid contingent on more building in the West Bank and things like that. Those are conversations I do engage in, and I try to put pressure on the Israeli government. But yeah, I'm not at the other ones where they hand me my slice of the pie and I tell them to go oppress Palestinians. And so it is definitely something that is a part of our reality. So for next time, I'm not going to keep you, I don't have to keep you on until 3, but unless people want to stay on for like general Q&A. But next time, if you can look at those documentaries, if you're someone who likes to take walks, you can listen to them instead of watch them. So that I do think you get a lot just by listening. The 50 Years War in particular, you actually hear discussions by people who are there. So, and you'll hear things on both sides that are blaming the other side, but you really get down in a sense into the trenches where you see where people were coming from on each side of the of the of the wars, and how things unfolded, and it just doesn't get old. I mean, I'm sorry, that's terrible. Watching these documentaries about people hating each other and going to war and killing each other, it never gets old, because it's actually very uplifting, is I think the message I'm trying to say, because you end up realizing how human it is and how people are so human and in touch with each other. And also, there's a reason that old enemies, can sit around and split a cup of Turkish coffee. Like there's a reason. Like they come to see how it's not a battle of the good guys and the bad guys. Like it's really not that there weren't good guys and bad guys there. There were good guys and bad guys there. There are people who did terrible things, and there are people who tried to stop them on both sides. But it's definitely it'll make you a richer person in it. So put that up there. And with that, is there, I'm certainly not going to start a topic at this point. I realize that at 20 of, and but I think that, so what I see happening is Israel and the Arab conflict. Next after that is, and this is usually the way the review session goes, the big long session before mikvah, holiday focused. So that, we kind of did long ones of Passover and a long one on Hanukkah, but it really just becomes, this is what Yom Kippur is mainly about. This is what Rosh Hashanah is mainly about. I found that holidays are an area that often in Intro to Judaism classes, people focus on, right? Because you're like, oh my gosh, I got holidays coming up and I don't know what they are. But actually, it's also the thing you're most likely to learn the most about in the future, because you'll live them. And so that, and you're also, none of you would be on the screen with me if you're not the kind of person who says, oh no, Shavuot is coming up. I don't remember everything about that. I think I'm going to read up on that. So that in that sense, don't feel like there are other things you won't get a chance to look at unless you really try hard. But the holidays have a way of coming up every year. And so that you always have these opportunities to reconnect with them. So with that, thanks to everyone. Ava, welcome to our group. Thanks to everyone who spent such a beautiful afternoon with us. Enjoy the warm weather. If anyone wants to stay on, I'll stay on till 3. If anyone wants to just the most minor thing in the world, which is, how do I kosher my rice scooper or something, I'm your authority. So you can stay on. If not, have a great day, everyone. Shavuot Tov. I'll see you in 2 weeks, and pay attention to everything. Bye-bye.
I just had a quick question.
Sure.
So it was about Shavuot. So on the Beth Israel page, as I at least save it, that's going to be there. We just email like the link that says the email for like the password to there, and this Shavuot service, like not service, but the celebration just take place all on that one link and then just keep going. Like
that's my plan. I'm hoping I don't screw it up. I'm hoping I can make breakout rooms work for the different sessions. Because so when you go to that one, the passcode is, wait for it, Sinai. So there you go. So just think you're at the Beit Din and they're like, where did we receive the 10 Commandments? You're like, Mount Moriah? And I'll be like, well, true on the technicality, but it's Sinai. So just think like my allergies are acting up and it's getting in my sinuses or something. There. So that's the passcode. But yeah, the idea is we'll break out room from there. So Eli Savitt will present when we're all together. And by the way, there should be things, some of the rabbis are like, I'm going to do more creative things, like just like movement. I know I'm very like analytical and stuff, but there's some who will be more creative and open. And it's customary to have cheesecake if you're not, I mean, you don't, or dairy treats on Shavuot, but you don't have to. So that's strictly custom.
It's funny because I just bought one yesterday, a cheesecake, when I went grocery shopping.
There you go. and the main reason for that is that because we're not, it's hard to understand where there are different traditions of why, but my understanding is that the origin of staying up all night was a mystical practice, because the Kabbalists, it's definitely a Kabbalistic thing. It did not exist prior to that. The Kabbalist view that when you are actually engaged in studying something Jewish, or like a Jewish text, and you're arguing, so Robin just got together, with Manisha and by Zoom, and they're just like, we're going to read a little Mishnah together, or we're going to read some Talmud, or we're going to read, none of us, we never read through the book of Isaiah, we're going to read through it. The Talmud idea is when you're doing that, the sparks are you're having an effect on the universe. And that comes from the Kaddish de Rabbanan, that the Kaddish that we do when we've been learning, is a Kaddish that is just like our normal Kaddish. May I bring God's purposes to bear in my lifetime, in each one of my days. May I come, and you do this liturgy. You add a little bit that says, and so may that channel compassion into the world to make a good life for everybody. And so there's this idea that you're actually channeling God's energy when you learn. And so if you can so the practice is to stay up all night learning, because that's a tikkun. It's a healing of the universe just merely through study. And that the origin of it was, you saw a lot of those texts were 1500s, 1600s. There are also Kabbalistic texts from earlier, but that was the flowering of Kabbalah, was in the 1500s, 1600s. And that coincided with the introduction of coffee into the Ottoman Empire. So as coffee spread into the Ottoman Empire, it was a lot easier to stay up all night and do a tikkun, an all-night tikkun. And I presume that dairy, and it was a Sephardic practice, because you're talking about the spread of coffee through Turkey and the Ottoman Empire and into northern Africa, Morocco, and northern Israel, and a lot of the Kabbalah flowering it was in, of course, Sfat in northern Israel. So that I suspect that you wouldn't be eating meat at 3 a.m. with your 18th cup of coffee. So that, I think the idea became it's going to be dairy, and we're going to, and probably a little sugar doesn't hurt. So that it is a crazy ride of sugar and caffeine for those who don't have to go to synagogue in the morning and read the book of Ezekiel. So, and who don't have kids. So, I mean, actually, I'm, what, call me out on this. Next year, get me to stay up all night. Like, if you guys say, Rob Nadav, we're getting together, we got 5 or 6 of us, we're studying all night, and we want you there, right? What do you call that? Challenge my ego, right? And it'll work. I'll be like, yeah, I'm still young and cool. I'll show up. I'll bring my cheesecake. I've got some home roasted brew. So, like, I will do it. This year, I'll probably go to sleep after the tikkun's over and get up in the morning, lead services. But I am up. My days of staying up all night are not all over, and I'd like to do them with you. So just remember that for a future year, but not by Zoom.
Last year you kept us up till 1.
I know I did, Robert, and you stayed. But then, but I also said something, I think it was one of those unrabbinic moments. So, like, I have to control myself, and I think it got recorded. So, like, I was getting a little bit loose toward the end. It wasn't about you. It was that comment about inclusion. It was at the Shavuot Tikkun toward the end, where someone was talking about how amazing it is that, Orthodoxy is allowing one woman to do one thing in one place at one time, and how progressive that is. That's when I'm like, that ain't what I call progressive. That's what I call absolutely pathetic. And then, like, ooh, Rabbi shouldn't talk that way, right? And so, like, I was like, I'm sorry. I was like, no, it's a beautiful thing. So
I got a question though.
Go ahead.
See you guys.
And then Aaron.
This has to do with the kitchen. I know we can't mix meat and cheese, and you got to have different vessels for them. But can you wash them together, like in the same dishwasher?
Okay, there are 2 answers to that. So the Orthodox would say no.
No.
Okay, but Rabbi Kane is it's 1 in.the.morning, and Rabbi Kane's, so I'm a rabbi who likes to who will note leniencies. So the answer to that is this, Robert, which is that in the Mishnah Torah and Maimonides, they're basically 4 main legal codes. Although the truth is, then there are dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens after them. But the 4 main legal codes, one of them is Maimonides. And in Maimonides' code, Maimonides points out that since most people have one metal basin that is their sink, right? Or it could have been made of clay or whatever you call it. I'm sorry, ceramic. But most people had a metal basin, and that basin was where they washed their dishes and things like that. And Maimonides points out that as long as you don't use that metal basin for preparing food, right? Because like you might, I mean, you might be like, whatever. I'll just say, Maimonides says, if you're not using your sink for preparing food, then it you don't it doesn't communicate unkosherness to other things. You can basically wash things together, because and you can certainly use one pan. So even though the Orthodox today don't accept that leniency, they say wash them separately, and the conservative movement's official position is to wash them separately. I don't consider that accurate because I consider it to be the dishwasher is essentially the wash basin of old. The food that is, according to Maimonides' code, the food that's being washed off is only, and don't take, someone brought this up at services the other day or whatever. It's only fit for a dog. If it's not, the word for fit in Hebrew is kosher. So if it's not fit for human consumption, and anything you would put in the dishwasher, even if technically you could eat it without dying, it is still in the category of what you would call it's fit for the dog, which I still think is, I love Judaism. Like it's medieval, but like it's still true. Like it's exactly like, you know what, my daughter's not going to finish her food. I'm not going to eat that slop, but I would let Fifi eat it if she really wants to lick the plate. Like it's still as true today as it was back then. So my feeling is I think it's okay to put things into the dishwasher together because it's in the realm of no longer human consumption food, and therefore it is neither kosher nor non-kosher, and it is not. The only problem would be if it did communicate an off flavor to the other dish. If something you pulled out of the dishwasher then was like, oh no, it really does like smell of cheese or meat, then it would be problematic. But in the absence of that outer possibility, I don't think it's a problem to put them in together. I really don't. So
Rabbi,
yeah, go yeah, go ahead, Cheryl. And then I don't know if Erin is still.
I'm here.
No, there you are. Sorry,
Yeah.
did
Cheryl,
you?
let's go to Erin first.
Oh, of course,
Okay.
of course.
No, it's okay.
Rabbi, do you have time? I could ask you later. It's because it's after 3 and I want to be mindful of your time.
Here, let's go. Go ahead.
Okay. I wonder when we talk about Israel, I wonder can you hear me okay?
Fine, just fine. I'm
Okay.
just
Sure.
concentrating.
I'm interested in suggestions to talk with family about Israel. The way when you were talking about, the demonizing wasn't what you said, but kind of the approach that it's okay to hate Israel, like that's okay. I mean, that's really, I think it's not even, people aren't even aware they're doing it. At least I've seen that. And that's in my extended family, I see that a lot. And so I'm just looking for help with how to gently, lovingly drop some seeds of different ways to look at that. So there's that. And then the other question I have is there one prayer or blessing that is appropriate for, like if you hear an ambulance or go by a car accident or, any kind of traumatic anything where people might need prayer?
So I'm going to work on the second one. There's nothing that jumps to my mind, but
Okay.
there may well be one. So I'm going to look into the second one.
Okay, thank you.
And for the first one, I mean, if you could figure that, Aaron, like we haven't. I mean, I'm serious. Like the ADL hasn't been able to figure it out. It is so. I mean, as I've said in the newspaper here before, as a newcomer to Ann Arbor, one thing I've noticed is that it's no place for hate unless you're Jewish.
Right.
Because then it's just like that's actually a good thing. Like
Mhm.
you should get in their faces about them. the only thing I can suggest, not the only thing, but one suggestion that comes forward is to remember, I like to do analogies. So
Mhm.
like I would use the China analogy. So China is one of the biggest human rights violators in the world. What they've done to a million Muslims is unforgivable and disgusting. But you have to be careful the way you talk about a human rights abuse by a group, because does that mean you hate your Chinese neighbor? Does that mean you hate your Chinese graduate student friend? Like, and that I think is the single biggest mistake, which is people seem to think it's okay if they, let's just say they're right, even though I don't think they are. Let's say there are human rights abuses in Israel, and let's just say what I think is wrong. I don't think it's apartheid and all that stuff, but let's just say it is, right? Would that be okay to foster a environment in America of Chinese people not feeling safe because they could get attacked because people hate China? Just as during apartheid, does that mean I walk up to a South African and I say, sorry, you can't go to the school, or you can't be my friend, or you can't be my child's friend, without knowing their position? So one of the things I try to explain to people is, what if it were the case that Beth Israel congregation was a congregation that has largely been devoted to Palestinian human rights causes? Not everybody. Would that make a difference? And people often look at me like that they've never thought of that question. So like, what do you do would that make a difference? And if someone says, well, yeah, back in, because I remember clearly the apartheid days of South Africa before Mandela and before they changed, is, you know, if someone had said, well, is it okay for you to go up and yell at your South African roommate before asking them what their position on it is? And if they're against apartheid, would that make a difference? So would it make a difference that almost half of Israelis are in favor of a Palestinian state? Like, and so are you hating those too? So like, I try to get at that area, and again, trying to use maybe a Chinese example or a different, I mean, to try to say like, you understand that you're lumping all Jews together, and you're having a problem with a country's policy. Um, and but like, you're really fostering hate if you can get them to see how they're making a transition. But I don't know if it'll work, because it hasn't worked when other people have tried to convince people of that.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Sure, but God bless you for trying to do it. I just I feel like the God, Lahavdil, I'm not the same as a tzaddik, but like, I just don't know what to do anymore about like how okay it is to attack American Jews
Yes.
over the policies of, and of course they don't understand this, but Netanyahu was like a mirror image of Trump. Is it no it so I mean, is it okay for people to ban American student groups in other countries because of Trump? And if you're like,
Mhm.
well, that would be weird, there is no difference between holding Ann Arbor Jews or University of Ohio Jews or University of, Jews accountable for the actions of one government that teeters at 50.0001%,
Mhm.
and so it's like, and like, there was something that was really horrible that Netanyahu did, and I got called by an Israeli reporter 2.5 years ago. Harvey maybe remembers. My one moment. I was on the front of an Israeli newspaper, which in Hebrew though, it wasn't in English, so you can see in English. But I got called by an Israeli reporter saying, "How did I react to something horrible Netanyahu did?" And I said, "Well, like." I don't know if our reporters should be calling Israelis asking them how they feel about something Trump did. In other words, like, I wouldn't say that we're the moral authority, like,
Mhm.
because I mean, like, you have to view it as two analogs. So like, any way I can kind of say, like, not all Americans speak for Trump, and for those people who think Biden's terrible, not, well, he doesn't speak for all Americans. So it's a very, I do believe that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, because
Yeah.
I do believe that you're lumping all Jews together by saying they're all bad, for any reason. That's pretty much the definition of a hate group.
Mhm.
It's, you're lumping all of them together over the actions of some is really is really not okay. Which brings me to the other question, which is Well, I'll let it go until next time. But I wanted to get to Cheryl. You had a question or you had a comment.
Oh, just the Kabbalah that you taught last time. I couldn't get the link.
No,
Can you?
I've got to put it up. I'm going to put it up. I haven't put it up on the website yet.
Oh, thank you so much.
Will do. And I know I can do it when we do Zionism next time. But one thing to just quickly say is that the on one foot version of religious Zionism and political Zionism. Political Zionism is and there's also cultural Zionism. So there are really three positions. Although honestly, I mean, this used to be part of my breadbasket in academia. I think times have changed. I'm not sure if the distinctions are as helpful as they used to be. Some people seem to think they're even more helpful. But political Zionism is that Jews should have a place where they're not under threat of being exterminated. And so that it doesn't have to be in Israel. It could have been another country. The UN was discussing creating space for the Jews in Uganda. One of the things that's come up in questions for me, and that was being considered by political Zionists, can there be a place where Jews can go, have their own country, have a military, and make sure that Jews can be defended from being killed? And that's political Zionism. Wouldn't have to be in the Holy Land. I will not say that thing I was going to say. And then a religious Zion. I mean, I'll say it next time, but you'll see. Maybe the question that came, I'll say it, which is one question that came to me once when I pointed that out in a different group. It wasn't last year, but they said to me something like, well, wouldn't have that been better, Rabbi Gain, because Uganda was more empty? And I was like, be careful about how filled up you think the Holy Land was in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And just remember, you can always read Mark Twain's essay on, he always wanted to make a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, which was not the easiest thing in the late 1800s. And his essay on it is, I went to the Holy Land and there was nothing there. There's nobody there. It was all a bunch of rocks and desert and malaria-ridden swamps. It was a big disappointment. So I'm not saying there was no one there. I'm not saying Arabs weren't there, but it wasn't the most densely populated corner of the planet. And then religious Zionism is that should be the Holy Land. That was that was the land that God gave the Jews in the Bible. We've been there ever since. This is not historical fiction about the fact that, at least from the destruction in the archaeology of Chazor, which is either from Deborah's siege of it in around 1100 or 1080 BCE, or if it, if it's the Joshua destruction of the, it doesn't matter. But so that for 3,000 years at least, Jews have been living in that land, and they had a country there. And so we need to revive the country that was destroyed by the Romans, or at least have a country there. Like, it can't be in Uganda. And then there's cultural Zionism, which is that whether it has to be in the Holy Land or it doesn't have to be in the Holy Land, it's not so much about either what the Bible says or it has to be, it's a fulfillment of biblical intentions. And it doesn't have to be for safety, but rather every people have a energy, a contribution to make to humanity. And the Jews have a contribution to make, and they need a place to foster that spirit, a place where they can express themselves. So like if Israel, if Israel, like under Herzl, political Zionist, looked just like every other country, but Jews were safe there and they had a hell of a military. And if anyone wanted to show up there and be like, I think I want to drive the Jews into the sea and kill them all, there would be stopped. That wouldn't be enough for a cultural Zionist. They would say something like, well, do people know Hebrew there? Nope, they speak English or they speak German. Really? German? Yeah. Or if that's not cool, how would you express the Jewish spirit there? Or if they get told this or that or the other, well, do they have Jewish music? And it's like, nope, they mostly play Beethoven and Bach and Vivaldi like the rest of us. And they don't really foster Jewish composers. They have a Jewish conductor and he conducts the Vivaldi. Cultural Zionists would be like, that's a waste. That's not what we're here for. It's not necessarily the land, and it's not necessarily not getting killed. There's something about, the Italians give us opera. and the Americans gave us global warming, and I don't know, but we want to see what the Jews can give us once again. And whether it could be socialism, it could be agriculture, it could be irrigation for the dry parts of the world with the little holes in the thing, it could be nanotechnology. But like when Jews speak Hebrew and grow up Jewish with other Jews doing Jewish stuff and making Jewish art, Jewish science, we want to see what it looks like. So that's cultural Zionism. So those are the three versions. Sorry to give you a preview for next time. Anyways, you're so kind to stay on. I'll kick you all off because you have better things to do. Shavua Tov. Have a great week, everybody.
Bye, everybody. See you next week.
Good seeing you.